Greetings and transmutations. You are being connected with the Cosmic Core. Careful, the first step is tricky.
You have entered a new level of consciousness.
We are adjusting your frequencies. Hooking up your psychic telephone. And blasting your heart with solar flares of love light. Welcome to the Cosmic Core with me, your soul sister and astral astronaut, Occult Priestess. Allow me to give you a tour of the Cosmic Core, a bit of a wrap to serve as a map. Coalescing cosmic consciousness, coming at you with a Darshan Disco Shaktipat Sitarai, blasting sonar to your third eye, dancing with the kiddies and bikinis, mystics and yoginis in the astral sky, waving at the shamans and the hippies as they drift by. Understanding, through love, we never die. We are the Platinum Ray, the Diamond Codes, the Star Seeds, and the Not-So Ascended Masters. Souls of two worlds, walking between them as best we can, perfecting the great work. We are beyond time, the hermits, the healers, the compassionate ones, the light warriors, mask rippers, and systems busters. We are missionaries from the upper realms, planting the seeds, anchoring the vibrations, teaching the way, unlocking DNA, cleaning up the bloodlines, clearing karma, and preparing humankind for the greatest show on earth. Occult Priestess, reporting for duty. Given name, Corinne Wilson. Nickname, Core. The Greek root of Corinne, meaning maiden. I am agent, M-I-B, that's maiden in black. For more about me, occultpriestess.com. You are listening to The Cosmic Core. Steve and Krys Crimi are a wonderful example of a compassionate life, a life of the seeker. Within a marriage, partners and publishers, they reignite the flame of oneness. Enjoy the picture show of an exciting, multicultural lifestyle. For this twin couple revisits to reveal. Blessings upon your household, Steve and Krys of Logosophiabooks.com. Joining us today in the Cosmic Core are two luminaries, partners, and authors. We have with us Steve Crimi and Krys Crimi. Let's get ready to rumble. Welcome to the Cosmic Core. Today we're going back to ancient Greece. Many of you were incarnated there. We hope today to jog some memories and awaken your heart back into the bliss state. Welcome to the Cosmic Core. Radiant couple, how are you today?
Doing really well, thank you. And we're radiating even right through the screen here.
We're doing well, thank you.
Wonderful, welcome. And so, you have a book out, and it is called The Katabatic Wind. So please, give us a short description of this wonderful book.
The word katabasis is the word used in Greece for the underground journey. And many heroes and deities take this underground journey, and it's an initiatory journey. Most famously would be Orpheus going down to rescue his betrothed Eurydice. He goes to the underworld. Pythagoras did it. Parmenides did it. A number of Greek heroes, and in fact, the Christ did it. They call it the harrowing of hell. The day after the crucifixion, he goes down into the underworld also and comes back. So that's part of the esoteric Christian tradition that's rarely, if ever, talked about. So the katabasis is this underground journey, and something that we practiced for a number of years is something called incubation, which is an actual the actual spiritual practice of the ancient Greeks done in temples, done in the healing centers at the Asclepions, where you would you would either go into a complete stillness and slip into the underworld, or into a dream state and be contacted by the underworld deities, notably Persephone, but Hecate, there are a number. So the idea of the book was that these underworld deities have been sorely neglected, and in fact just covered over, and they're the above ground, the heaven deities, the God the Fathers, have been recognized for a long time. So the idea of the book was to try to bring back some sort of recognition through talking about myths. There's some Sanskrit, there's some Indian mythology in there also, and some sacred geometry. And the idea was to understand that this katabasis, this underground journey, that there's, this sort of wind of knowledge that you bring back with you, that needs to be, reblown throughout this culture in order to restore some balance and perspective, and some, much needed wisdom.
I am so on the same page with you. It feels so good to be listening to the same radio station. I'm getting the same message as you are, only you two wrote the book. Thank you for that.
Well, I would have to say Steve wrote the book. I was the cheerleader.
The wind beneath his wings.
And the editor and the Steve, this makes no sense. You got to rewrite it, person.
What are you kidding? No.
So so that's the book. It came out in 2015, and it's part of us. We have a publishing company, Logosophia Books. So we have a number of spiritually centered books of various kinds. Some having to do with biodynamics, some having to do some novels.
Native American
spirituality by this incredible person who died a couple of years ago, Henry Neese. He was in his 90s. Did the Native American Sundance for 40 or 50 years or something like that. So so that's kind of our our good work, our life work in this realms. Try to bring some sort of recognition of that which is lost, and especially lost in the West, because as you know, the real spirituality of the West is gone. And people go looking for it to India, to yoga, to all these other traditions, which is fine on one hand. On the other hand, this is the culture that really needs to remember what it has even no idea that it's forgotten.
So do we consider as academics the Greeks to be Western?
You consider them, they're generally considered as the beginning of Western civilization.
I see. That makes some sense. And so...
Pre-Socratics as well.
Please say that again.
The Pre-Socratics, those who came before Socrates.
Right.
Parmenides, Empedocles, those are the names that come to mind.
And Pythagoras also. There are a number of, if you want me to get into this, could do it quickly. There are people, they call them pre-Socratics, and if you go to a philosophy course in college, it's most likely they'll be taught as sort of, proto-scientists, someday they'll grow up to be Aristotle, if they're really good. But in fact, these people were just full-blown mystics.
Indeed. Thank you.
And that's what was lost. And it gets lost through Plato and Aristotle, where what was once a gift from Persephone, when Parmenides makes his underground journey in his poem, he makes an underground journey, encounters Persephone. Persephone gifts him logic as a gift. Now, why does she give him logic? Well, it's a gift to take this disparate dualistic world and bring you back to oneness. And what Aristotle and others have done since then, they've taken logic and turned it into rationalism.
Indeed.
And rationalism is the idea that you can get to the real through thought. and that's the train that the West has been on ever since.
Was Persephone at all a trickster in that moment?
Well, she was a very interesting trickster in this poem. It's a very interesting poem by Parmenides, because she tells Parmenides, being is one, and she uses in logic, and logic is to be employed to get you to come to the oneness of being, of all being. And then she goes, but you got to live in the world, and so I'm going to tell you a few things about duality too. And she goes and she's like, the first time anyone described, for example, the tropics of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn and the whole world as a sphere, and these things like that came out of her teachings of Parmenides, a generation before Socrates. So this would have been, around 450, 500 BC. So this is, so yes, she was very much a trickster. I think all the gods are in a sense of tricksters and tricksteresses, I guess.
It just depends on the lesson you need to learn.
Well, I think so. And, if you want to go fully into it, reality is a trick.
Indeed.
Right? The whole concept that we feel like we live in this, this dualistic world is a trick, and the biggest trick is our ego, is that we think we're the ones who's doing everything.
Yeah, it's all smoke and mirrors, my friend.
It is.
It is. So, and since the gods and the goddesses are the really origins of this trick, and for example, Empedocles says, the world is a world of experience, our senses and the elements. It feels like an incredibly well done painting. Mm-hmm. It feels like it's really real. I feel like I'm touching the floor, when in fact nothing, exists outside of my sensorium in reality.
What I'd like to do is baby step the Western mind to the underworld so that we can describe what we're talking about. So we understand through Carl Jung's work that we have a waking daylight consciousness / ego. We also have a subconscious realm, which is a reflection of the outer ego. And if there are things going on in the subconscious that are not being attended to, they will then be projected in the form of lessons out into the real world with the ego. Then we have the pineal gland, or the gateway to superconscious, Christ consciousness, Krishna consciousness, or heaven realms, or the upper realms, upstairs, I like to call it. And some people have broken through and gotten through that portal to have visions and visitations, and some people only break through it momentarily because their soul needs it. Other people do it on the daily. So we have these three aspects of psyche, if you will. Waking day, everyone knows. Subconscious, most people know. And then superconscious is more rare, but becoming less rare, even as we speak. So therefore, you go through the pineal and you have a choice. You got an elevator. Do you want to go down or up? But now we're going to go down, and I would like you to explain the underworld.
Well, yes, and as I believe in the Hermetic tradition, right, the way down is the way up. Well, I'll talk to you from a practical standpoint. Okay, the practice of incubation is kind of like the Shavasana in yoga, which is called the corpse pose.
Indeed.
And what you do, and we studied for a decade with this woman from Calcutta in a very traditional yoga center.
Please give us her name.
Her name is Gurani Anjali, and she died in 2005, I think, something like that. Anyway, we were there from about 1985 to 1995. And it was a very traditional place. You studied the Yoga Sutras. I learned some Sanskrit. So she, I will just point out,
and Western philosophy.
And Western philosophy. This is also where we really understood, the mysticism of the West that's been forgotten. So anyway, she said that the Shavasana is the most difficult pose of all the yoga poses, which is always very interesting. So, and the reason for that is because it requires complete and absolute surrender.
Yes.
In that pose. And, not thinking of the next pose, not thinking of whatever it is, not thinking really, for that matter. So what incubation for the Greeks and for Pythagoras was this lying in absolute stillness. And if you do that and you reach a point of complete and absolute surrender, and for me it might take, a good 45 minutes or half hour or something like that. When I was practicing more regularly, now it would probably take a week. But at the time that we were doing it as on a regular basis, you might feel yourself sinking down. Be one possible. All of a sudden, an aspect of you would get very, very heavy, and again, it's almost like a trick on your part, whereas you are almost tricking yourself into believing you're dead, because you have to be dead in a certain sense to get to the underworld.
And partially, isn't it an ego death?
Yes. You can't, like as I kind of intimated, the ego really can do nothing except, comment and complain and be afraid of doing this, because why would an ego be interested in doing any sort of practice that eliminates itself,
Indeed.
So there'd be this sinking, and, maybe nothing would happen. Maybe you would, receive some sort of contact. Maybe there would be a vision of some kind, an image, a voice. Sometimes I think Krys got a voice once from, she got a message from Asclepius, right?
Asclepius, yeah.
Oh, can we hear that, please?
Well, it was just a phrase, and it was, Asclepius gets better and better as I go on.
And tell us what that meant to you personally.
That Asclepius would be more fully present for me, and that I would have that experience of the presence of Asclepius more fully.
Well, what does he represent to you?
Healing.
Okay.
The fullness that healing brings. Because the healing, when you're wounded in some way, there's the implication or the experience that there's a piece missing.
Or that you're broken. Yeah.
Same thing. So it's not functioning, so it's missing in its activity or presence or influence in your life, and it can't fully support you.
Wow.
So when Asclepius gets better and better, you become more filled. Well, I don't even like to say you become. There is more fullness.
There you are. Yes.
Right? You have to really take your self language out of the equation, and there is fullness. So maybe that's a better way of saying it, and maybe that's why in yoga, in the Yoga Sutras, they use those short, very terse aphorisms, because it cuts to the quick.
Root causes, keep it simple.
Yeah, it's not verbose. The verbosity is left behind, and there's just down to the marrow. So it's just down to the essential. Clean.
You really pointed out why I'm not an author at this time, because I would write a book that was 5 pages.
Well, I think there's really a place for that. So I wouldn't really necessarily go there. I would say for those who are newly seeking, they need the meat on the bone.
Mm-hmm, indeed.
And then they can chew it away.
That's right.
And digest, right?
Yes, because of logic, yes.
Yeah, and didn't you, maybe you found that helpful when you were in your learning phase? Please flesh that out for me. I don't understand.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then you can leave it behind. It's like training wheels.
Exactly. Or booster rockets, as Hermes calls them.
Booster rockets, sure. Yeah. Even better. Yeah.
And so, who is this Asclepius? Tell us what he did and who he was.
Tell him about the Asclepius.
Sorry, yes.
Well, Asclepius is the Greek god of healing.
Son of Apollo.
Son of Apollo. And
there were healing centers everywhere, and again, this is where you would go, and the healer priests. They were called healer priests.
I like hero priests too. That's cool.
That's in there too.
That too.
But yeah, and the word in Greek was iatromantis.
Please spell that.
IATRO, which is the healing part, and MAT mantis, MANTIS is the priest part. So the atromantis were the healer priests and priestesses too. who would dream for you, or you would not, or you would dream yourself. They had actually, we went to one in Turkey in 2015 on the west coast of Turkey, and it was really beautiful because we were walking in together.
It was like a homecoming.
And we both heard basically a voice in our head saying, "Hi, welcome, nice to see you again," after
Oh
how
my
many
goodness.
thousands of years.
I got chills just from that little bit.
And we both got that separately at the same time. We just turned to each other, and noted that.
And for me, it wasn't exactly a voice in my head, but it was more a feeling of warm, welcome, familiarity, like a homecoming. Just on the approach to the Asclepion, when this was in Turkey, because we went back to Turkey 3 years ago. So as a matter of history, personal history, we'll just say that we like to laugh and say that our first date was a trip to Turkey, and we backpacked for a month there. And it wasn't necessarily meant to be a date, but we worked together in a psych hospital, and
oh my goodness.
We ended up traveling on this trip. The two of us went to Turkey for a month in 1985.
Did you actually meet through work?
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
Oh my goodness. You were there healing the lepers. And then you were called to the temple.
Didn't even think of that. Thank you. Tell her about the poster.
Right. Oh,
The
so
travel
the way we met was there was like she was a recreation worker, and I worked on the admissions ward, which is very exciting sometimes because everybody came in the in the full expression of what it is that society couldn't stand about them.
Yes, and, I know. I've been in the psych ward 14 times with Kundalini.
Oh, okay.
Right, and there were people there, and that was kind of one of the first times I sort of encountered that, people were there for spiritual reasons.
Right.
So anyway, there was a poster on the wall of it was actually a Korean dancer, but but he had the symbol of the Tibetan book that's on the cover of Jung's the Tibetan Book of the Dead version that Jung introduces. And it's the Tri-Lamaic cross is on there, and so I was just being a smart ass, saying, "Oh, look, the Tri-Lamaic cross," and she goes, "Oh, from the Tibetan Book of the Dead," so that's
was love at first.
True love.
That was the code. The secret code.
It was.
That we recognized each other.
It's a certain form of seduction that doesn't get used too often. But
you find it seductive. Oh, that's hilarious.
Right. So that was our opening salvo,
Wonderful. And you were called straight to the temple. And then I'm wondering, Krys, because in my opinion, that Greek god is your spirit guide.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, good.
And that you're meant to help heal.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Well, she certainly did a lot of that at the psych hospital. She had a horticultural therapy program for almost 2 decades there.
Wow.
And that a lot of people passed through there, and a lot of people were helped. She had a beautiful greenhouse program on Long Island where we used to live.
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, go ahead.
It was the job from heaven.
I would say so. That's your mission.
I absolutely adored working at the greenhouse, and at the end of the day, I would close the door and I would just say, "Wow, I don't know who to thank, so I'll just thank the universe for this job." It is just like, you're going to pay me to do this? Okay, it was really heavenly.
I'm so glad you got to experience that.
Thank you. Yeah. Very happy memories from there.
But now we're retired in Asheville, busier than ever.
Exactly. You're retired so you can work harder.
That's the deal.
So, well, actually, I came from a town, and so one of these Pre-Socratics is named Empedocles, who's a real interesting character, and he was from very close to where my grandparents came from, and it's right on the side of Mount Etna, talking about volcanoes going off, and that's a volcano that's pretty much currently, the town is like continuously covered with ash.
Wow.
From that.
I do believe that the volcanoes are gateways for souls, because when I went to Hawaii, I was doing a tarot reading, and the volcanoes talked to me and said, hey, you have to ask us permission to do that work here. And so I did.
Interesting. We just have a friend who's a psychic, and they're thinking about moving to Ecuador, and I guess the place that they stayed was between two volcanoes.
Yes.
And she was telling about all of her discussions, and the volcanoes were talking to her the whole time that she was there. There was sort of, one was male, one was female, and then there was another one nearby that was the child of them.
Oh my goodness, how amazing.
And the whole thing was really interesting. And, they were saying, yeah, well, if you want to come, this is what you're going to have to do. And they're thinking about it seriously. And it's kind of interesting, too, because a couple of days ago, she did a little clearing on me, and Hermes came in.
Oh, hi, Hermes.
So
what did he say?
Well, it was just part of this sort of flushing that we did, and sort of reconnecting things that were not connected within me, in grounding that needed to be, to kind of like next, maybe it's sort of like the next stage for whatever work we're doing here.
Did he give you a little quote or mantra to?
No, I don't think there was anything specific,
Okay.
for me. I think I don't know, I really don't know exactly why he showed up, or just to help moving things. But I guess, being a double Gemini, Hermes is kind of a natural contact point.
Yes, he says that all Gemini births are his children. Hermes does have a little message for you to put, like, what is that? Attach to what you got the other day, is build it and they will come. So I do believe you're getting prepared for another mission.
It's entirely possible. I've kind of felt like, I've completed something. And, so that I've turned 60, it just felt like there's, something is next, and sort of am waiting for that to emerge. I'm really, in general, I'm pretty dense, and it takes a lot to get to. I don't have, visions or contacts, or, I've had a few wonderful, experiences, but I don't get a lot of direct, in fact, that's kind of a bugaboo, or sort of a, one of my complaints is that, I don't seem to get instruction. I feel like I'm floundering all the time.
It must be frustrating.
At points, but, so I don't know on whose side that is, but, like I said, a little bit on the dense side, and they got to work with what they got here with me,
Well, you are ever evolving. There's hope yet.
Okay.
And I'm teasing you, of course. So going back shortly to mental health, Kundalini awakenings, and Western culture, where we tend to burn witches in the sense that we put the psychics in the psych ward and drug them. And it's also a kidnapping when you really think about it.
Sure.
And incarceration for not being a criminal, but for being ahead of the curve, obviously. But I wanted to know if you guys were also familiar with Stuart Savosky and Stanislav Grof.
Yeah, a little bit with Stanislav Grof, and that's the holotropic work, right?
Yes, and the
Breath work.
Kundalini. And also Stuart worked with prisoners. He was the first one. He pioneered working in prisons with meditation.
Oh,
Right. Okay.
And he also ran a Kundalini clinic for 20 years here in California.
Wow.
So what? Yeah.
No,
So what
I've never heard his name.
So what does a Kundalini clinic entail? And
It's the psych ward for people who know they're going through a spiritual awakening. Therefore, there's a lot of compassion, and there wasn't drugging. It was a comfortable situation to awaken in.
How wonderful. I've never heard of that.
No, that's terrific. It's terrific that things like that exist.
So compassionate.
So you wouldn't have had to have gone back 14 times if something like that had been available for you?
Correct. And what happened through my Kundalini experience is that they kept stopping the awakening. And so I would have Kundalini for about 30 days until the drugs really kicked in and put me in the underworld again, basically.
Yeah. No, it's criminal.
It's cruel. It's really cruel.
And that's the whole thing. Just getting back to what we've lost, and that's why people go looking to India and places like that, because at least in India, as and that place is shifting too, there's a cultural context for enlightenment.
Indeed, cultural context for enlightenment.
Right?
Indeed.
And, that if you need to go, wig out in the cemetery for a month, there's a precedent for that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas here, boom, you got to be in line.
You must comply
in the straitjacket all the time.
Yeah, consciousness jail, really. And Terence McKenna talks a lot about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I often used to say to the people in my program, it's like, don't let anybody tell you that you're crazy. There's nothing wrong with you. No matter what their problem was. It's just, I would see in myself the same exact symptoms, if you will. It was a matter of degree.
Exactly.
Or balance.
Mm-hmm.
And to have this god-awful label that you have to drag around like a bag of bones.
And pills.
And pills,
yeah.
It's like mental straitjacket. Yeah, it was really sad.
Thank goodness for your compassion, the both of you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was very fortunate that we were there.
And at least, that's one of the things I always admired about the Sufi tradition is the madnesses and the divine realization are all woven together, and they understand that.
If you spin like Wonder Woman, you're going to hit a higher state of consciousness.
Yeah.
That's what I think, the ego fears the higher states of consciousness. The ego can hang out in the underworld, it's kind of welcome there. At times, if you go really deep, of course, it's going to strip all that away, like Anana's journey into the underworld.
Exactly.
But there are a lot of rich kids under 30 who are exploring the psychedelics, who are just honestly going to the Bardo and being messed with by their ancestors.
Yeah, and messed with in not a good way.
Indeed, and that was part of my problem and why my Kundalini wasn't all bliss, because I have a very intense bloodline. I'm related to Senator John Glenn, and it's really a dark bloodline, and a lot of us are born in these bloodlines to clean them up.
Right.
So having sleep paralysis for 19 years informs me that I was attacked so much because I'm special.
I'm wondering, why would the ancestors mess with you? I would have the feeling like the ancestors would be your allies.
That is a wonderful and beautiful question. Thank you for asking it.
And wouldn't you think that they would recognize you as family and want to help you?
Yeah. So think about the Bardo and the hungry ghosts of Buddhism. So describe for us a hungry ghost.
Well, for me, for me, it's a dark spiritual entity that's feeding off of negative emotions.
How is it created?
Level. How is it created?
Thought forms.
Thought forms.
Thought forms.
She's talking about tulpas.
Yeah, like Gollum.
Well, let me walk you through it.
Okay, yeah.
Let's hold hands and walk through it.
Yeah, let's hear. Yeah.
Okay, so we die, right? We die. Let's take an example. We died a violent death, all right? Immediately, we have a pain body, which is an astral self. This is not a tulpa because it's actually your whole consciousness. Everything that you are aware of is the pain body. When you have a pain body through violent death or through a very horrible lifetime that you didn't make any right choices in, then you become a ghost in the Bardo, a hungry ghost. And they await reincarnation so that they can straighten out their karma. When they are awaiting reincarnation, they have access to their bloodlines and the people in the bloodline. And as I've seen with clients with their ancestors, for many years, the ancestors try to engineer the life of the living people in the family so that when the ancestor reincarnates, The family will have material possessions. The marriages would have been correct, in which grew the bank account. And it is all financially based because power in this world is financially based. And so the Bardo hungry ghost ancestors will attempt to engineer the family in the way they see fit for their own selfish needs, so that when they reincarnate, it will be easier for them.
So all right, so the ancestors are manipulating.
If they are hungry ghosts, obviously many of our ancestors have gone to the heaven realm because they don't have a pain body per se, which is the hungry ghost.
Right. So, yeah, go ahead.
What causes the pain body is a life lived in domination of how do I put this? Basically in service to the self.
Right.
And so you're taking that to an extreme. It just seems like so much of, the really dark stuff that's going on is just generating more and more of this to try to make it some sort of self-perpetuating thing.
So it's all about, so you're talking about the monetary gains and physical comfort.
Yes.
And physical achievements.
Materialism.
Reaching a higher spiritual level of awareness.
Because they're hungry ghosts. They don't know better. Obviously, they didn't learn it in the lifetime.
Right. And you came in through a particular bloodline to try to shift that karma.
Indeed.
And to move it away. Yeah. I always had this kind of feeling that I kind of came in under the radar, growing up in very much a working class family in Queens, New York.
Working class heroes.
Yeah, where no one read books, no one, there was no political thoughts in anyone's head, and and so I always felt like I probably just somehow I may have decided to have come in under the radar, and it was only until maybe late high school, early college that things started erupting, like the sleep paralysis thing.
So you didn't have that as a child? You had that more as you were a teenager?
No, I think it started maybe around my last year in high school and lasted for about 5 years or something like that.
Yeah, so I got a bookmark. We're still describing the Bardo to them and why the underworld is the underworld and why we go there. Because we do have choice, and you have to go to the underworld before you can get to the upper world, but some people just keep going to the underworld. Let's go, come on.
Right. And of course the underworld has gotten a bad name and maybe given a bad name, whereas I can actually trace this to Plato's cave, actually. So in Plato's Republic, he talks about prisoners being chained in a cave, and then you have to be brought out of the cave into this sort of rationalist for realm, where the light of the sun is. But my understanding, and I may be way off, but this is my take on it, is that what the caves were the places where all in the Western tradition, in the Greek world, the caves were the places where people went to do incubation, to contact the underworld deities.
We saw the cave as the womb, of course.
Oh, exactly, and even in the gematria, and I get into this in my book, the gematria around the numbers around 108, the gematria around 108, all are words, with the initiate, the underground, and all these kind of words that connect to that understanding, to that initiatory underground understanding.
Excuse me. Could you please give our listeners a website for the gematria? Because I know that's a huge system, and they're probably going to be curious about it.
About gematria? I don't know.
Or just spell it for us, because I'm sure there's a .com.
Sure. It's a gematria, gematria, and that's the ancient practice of hooking up numbers with letters, and then when you add them up, they become sort of concepts. So it's very prominent in Greek and in Hebrew. So so for an example, the word in the Hebrew Bible, the gematria, if you add up the numbers for the words for love and for God and for knowledge, they add up to the same thing. So it's an understanding of how things are connected, how concepts are connected by the same numerical things.
I would agree. It's a dot connector. It's an esoteric, mystical, based on math. Funny enough.
Yes, and I would give a book. It's called Jesus Christ, Son of God, S-U-N, Son of God, by David Fiedler, F-I-D-E-L-E-R, or F-I-D-I-L-E-R, Fiedler. And he actually ran a magazine called Gnosis Magazine for a long time, or was part of it. That was really a great magazine until magazines kind of died with the internet. But anyway, that's a great book to understanding the sacred aspects of Greek gematria. I would go there before I would go to a website, because start doing searches on it. The topic has just gotten so distorted, and especially all the numbers that used to be sacred now are have been taken over, like number 33 and things like that.
Indeed.
So that's part of the living in the Kali Yuga.
Exactly. And I would say for the seeker, when you get the gematria, put in your name, plug in your nickname if you have one, and see what comes up for you, because I found destiny points in that.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for it. It's a whole wonderful study. And it hooks up with all the cosmic numbers of creation and generation, and like I say, 108 is one of those big numbers, and 72 is another one. So and Plato and all the ancients were aware of this, but I guess the point I was trying to bring up was that Plato takes this deep underground feminine knowledge, and he puts ignorance in the cave. So now what used to be the place where you went for wisdom is the place that holds you in ignorance, because it's not rational. And
how did he do that?
Well, he did that in this in the Republic in this what's called the allegory of the cave. There's two very famous allegories, and one of them is called the allegory of the cave. And so it sounds reasonable. Yes, we're chained in darkness underground, and all we see are shadows, and then we come out of the cave into the light, and we see what's real. And so it sounds very reasonable. And this model, this allegory, has been the basis for Western understanding. I won't call it wisdom, knowledge maybe, since Plato, really, 2,500 years.
Amazing. And then the birth of rationalism, of course, and the logical mind can be the left brain is completely divorced from the feminine right brain, then we become something other than what we were born to be.
Yes, exactly. And so part of writing this book is Katabatic Wind is trying to bring back this feminine underground aspect into awareness. So I've gotten so many gifts from the goddess. This is my gift back, trying to do what little we can over here to bring that into the awareness, and be a sort of homeopathic counterbalance to rationalism.
That's such a big deal. Wow. I'm like contemplating it. It's so amazing.
Yeah, it's the cause of everything, in a certain sense, and it's how people are kept in darkness. So I'll give you a little example, if you don't mind. Let's take so what happens with rationalism is that you end up taken out of your direct experience.
Interesting. That's so true.
Right? Because you're into thought, so you think that thoughts are real. So I'll take a really basic example: heliocentrism, versus terracentrism, right? So that's the big one of the ancient arguments, whether the Earth was the center of the universe and everything revolved around it, or whether the earth revolved around the sun. Now, there were Greeks who understood that the earth revolved around the sun, but the way you get to that, you have to have a whole series of thoughts and experiments and all these things to pull you out of your direct experience, because your direct experience is sun comes up there, goes across the side, goes down there, right? That's your experience. Sure. That's your life. But science will tell you, but rationally, no, that's not really what's happening. The earth is spinning, this is happening, that's happening. But it takes you out of your lived life.
And how do we experience gnosis without direct experience?
Mm-hmm. Oh, exactly. I mean, that's what gnosis is, right?
Exactly.
Right? What is it other than direct experience, which encompasses all the worlds, encompasses the divine world, the interior world, and the asshole ego world, is part of it, but it's not running the show.
Exactly. I'd like to give a quick breakdown here for those people to catch up who might not be on the same page right now. So I have been taught through spiritual transmission that through the Yugas, which you can look up in the Hindu spirituality, we're now in a current Kali Yuga. Yugas are cycles of time and cycles of experience. My soul came in ancient Egypt, and we were at a very high vibrational level where you could reach out and speak with the gods, and the statues would come to life and speak with you. And so there was very little separation between heaven and earth. However, in this experiment of the apple and the snakes, we wanted the knowledge of good and evil, not wisdom, knowledge of good and evil. Therefore, through the Yuga cycle, we lowered in consciousness. We fell to flesh like angels, falling to the five senses. Only some of us never only had five senses. In fact, a lot of us never only had five senses. The sixth sense, as the vibration was higher in the past, even Greece, the sixth sense was still in play. Therefore, you could still hear heaven. The Dark Ages took all of that away. And obviously that was the Dark Ages. And that was the lowest, I believe, the lowest point in human history. And then from there, vibrations raised again. And we are now in the current cycle of, I believe, welcoming the age of Aquarius, heaven on earth, where there will again be no separation. And I can't do a timing on that because time isn't real, but I believe we're careening towards it at lightning speed. And so therefore we see a fall of consciousness, the fall of man, if you will, because beautiful souls choose to learn good and evil. Great. Let's do the game. Let's play it. Let's do it. And we did. And we did missions. And many of us incarnated for missions only. We're not here necessarily. Masters are not here necessarily to grow their own souls. They are here to volunteer. However, as a side effect, we do get a lot of lessons and we do grow into even greater beings through having been through the karmic earth cycles of incarnation. So I'm just saying, when we're choosing to go to the lower realm, we are choosing definitely to work on ourselves. And some people go there and do a Buddhist practice in the Bardo of breathing to help the hungry souls there get some light so that they can look up and see that God is right above them. There's no trapping. There's no punishment. It literally is between you and how much you love yourself. That's my breakdown. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No. Well done. Well said.
Yes,
well
between you and you is the that's the fulcrum point there.
That's where the cross meets in the middle, where all the infinity goes, in the Mahamudra, in the 0 point of you.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Yeah, that's the symbolism of the cross, because where does it cross? Cross is right at the heart.
And that's the corpse pose when you think about it.
Yes. Well, yes, in a way. Mm-hmm.
So surrender, the hanged man, the sacrifice, that is what one must build up their strength for, to go into the underworld. See, we don't have these really rituals anymore that are preparing your soul to go through initiation, right?
No, that's the great loss in the one of the great losses. I seem to be a broken record, but yeah, we've lost a little bit here. So yes, so initiation, of course, and the Eleusinian initiation. I mean, everyone, thousands and thousands of people, at least in the ancient times, went through these initiations, men and women, both. So it's just a huge loss, and as I say in the introduction to my book, that what we have now is an anti-initiation, not into life but into death, because the closest thing to initiation now is joining the military, and the result is the opposite of what the initiation was and there are people doing some good work, I think, like Martine Prechtel and people like that. But again, they're borrowing initiations from other cultures that still have them, in tribal situations where they still have them intact. And like I said, it's the Kali Yuga. You got to take what's available. Everything is fractured. The wisdom is fractured. Your ways of getting it, and we're putting ourselves back together, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and going into the military and the war zone it's an initiation into a death cult.
I agree. Blood sacrifice.
It is blood sacrifice, yeah. And that's why we always like to bring up the work of Martine Prechtel. Do you know him?
No, please go on.
His work, he's amazing. He has a place out west in New Mexico. And I guess he's like in his late 60s, around my age. But in the 70s, he was born on a reservation on a pueblo in New Mexico, and his mother was Canadian Native American and his father was Swiss. He was very close to his mother, and she was an artist, and she died, I guess, when he was in his late teens, early 20s, and he was brokenhearted, and he left home, and he just took her box of paints and brushes and her artwork, and he just set out on his own hero's journey. Mm-hmm. And he went down through Mexico into Guatemala, and then he came to the city of Santiago Atitlan, and he walks into the plaza, and it's so typical of these stories where this really old shaman hit him on the head and said, "Where have you been? I've been waiting 2 years for you to show up. You're late."
Oh my goodness.
Took him under his wing and trained him as a shaman. And so he lived among the Tutihil Indians. And so then he was there. He was in that training, deep, deep, deep into it, and accomplished already when the death squads came in, the CIA-backed death squads came in and wiped out the village that he was in. And so many of the babies and children that he had brought into the world were murdered.
And anyone who was a shaman, of course, had a price on their head.
So, oh my goodness, shaman hunting.
Yeah. So, yeah, because they were the holders of the traditions and the culture and the knowledge, and of course you want to get rid of them. And they were the power people, the ones who gave the people their strength. So as a shaman, you're involved in birthing. So you're midwifing these little ones to come into the world. And it's such a beautiful tradition that they have, is they will take the umbilicus of the new one and they put it in what they call the village bundle. And that goes up into the rafters of the home of the shaman. So they have this bundle that has the umbilical cords of all their ancestors.
Wow.
And it holds that energy of the people, who they are and where they're rooted and, where they belong. So he wanted to stay and fight, but his friends recognized that he would be murdered. So they said, what you need to do is take the village bundle and go.
Wow.
And he went back into the United States with his family. He had 2 young children and a wife. And he was living in a tent in the woods. And I don't know, someone knew about him. And, Robert Bly, the poet?
Yes.
Robert Bly. Well, apparently Robert Bly got wind of it, and he sought him out.
Wow.
And he helped him get back on his feet. And then he said to him, Martine, you really need to bring this to the world. You need to regain your strength. I know you're in deep grief, but you have work to do. And so he assisted him to get back into his role. And he said, you really need to be out teaching. So that is what brought Martine to have this conclave at his place.
Ojo Caliente?
Ojo Caliente. And he has what he calls Bolad's Kitchen.
So,
and it's where they, it's this phrase that he has that it concocts the image of, you've got this wonderful stew and you've got all these beautiful aspects of the culture and they need to be cooked beautifully into this wonderful, delicious stew. And then, redistributed. It's food. This is spiritual food.
No doubt.
He really relies very heavily on initiation, that this is the missing link for young people, why they are so lost today, that they lash out in anger, and it's all misdirected energy. That energy is so potent and so powerful that it needs to be directed for good in the world. Otherwise, and if it's not, it's destructive.
I totally agree. I put myself through an initiation as a teenager, and I actually had to explain to my guru. She asked, why did you pierce your tongue? Which, that's kind of a weird thing. And I said, I made a pact with the goddess Ma'at for her to teach me how to tell the truth always. So that was my initiation that I made up.
Well, it's wonderful that you were able to do that,
That was your inner knowing.
Yeah, and we have a number of, actually lucky enough to have a few young friends who've been working with him. I guess they go down for periods of time and study with him, and they have this beautiful tradition of corn and the children, and Martine has a really wonderful book about that, so that the DNA, in other words, when you get married, for example, the corn of one family grows, and the corn that another family grows gets cross-pollinated with each other. So, and then this new family would grow corn, and so that the DNA of the corn and the DNA of the people were on complete parallel paths. And what we were able to do for our friends, we just had and also for young ones, and they asked us to grow some corn for them, and it was for their new child. For their new child was born last year, and the corn. Then they gave us corn seed that was dipped
from Martine. From Martine's group.
Right, and then it was dipped in the placenta.
In the blood from the placenta of the infant.
And then they gave it to a few friends to grow, and we grew it out. And then last month we brought it over and then they make a certain drink with it. They have a whole ceremony.
Had a beautiful corn ceremony, and to celebrate the child's first year.
Yeah.
And then they make a fermented drink. I can't remember the name of it. Mats. So
these are very ancient traditions.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Martine's work is exquisite, and he's brilliant.
Yeah.
He has to be to pull it off, really.
Yeah, because he's not only, he's not like he's just, regurgitating. He understands, where he is, and what needs, what kind of world you're trying to do this in, or how it's going to work, and trying to make it work in this world. Not just trying to say, well, here's what we did, for 5,000 years, because it's got to be transmuted like everything else to make it work.
We can't use the old ways in the new paradigm. It's just not possible. The old ways are for the old paradigm, and now the new ways are coming in. But the foundation, we can't have a foundation that is based on Western science. That is no foundation whatsoever. So we go back to Greece.
Right. So so you have to understand what you've lost before you can carry some spark of it forward into, as I say in the book, what's unimaginably new.
Unimaginably new. And I believe that Carl Jung said something very similar to that.
I probably stole it from him.
And Hermes
You can't
says,
just keep planting the same corn over and over. It needs to cross-pollinate. It needs to have new life breathed in
yes,
at every juncture point.
yes. And those are the new teachings in that we've gone to, as a culture, to science, which isn't teaching us crap except for linear measurements.
Yeah, it's very limiting.
It is. And so is the human body when we think about it. We're very limited here, and so we work with what we have. My guru's guru says, this is samsara, we must try. But also, Hermes says, you got to get back to your roots before you can branch out.
Mm-hmm. You have to at least know that you're... This is the tragedy of Western civilization, is that we don't even know that we had sacred origin.
Agreed. And it's original sin. That's what's always,
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Thank you. What's his name? Augustine for giving us original sin.
And then I heard a rumor that Dante is the hell that most of us are thinking of these days. And Dante wasn't, he's not that old.
Dante, no, 1300s. 1300s.
And that's where we get our concept of hell now, where hell is actually like a Viking goddess.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And Jehovah was a fertility goddess. So really...
Oh, I didn't know that.
Thank goodness I was pagan first.
Uh-huh.
I did the tour of the pantheons and said, oh my gosh, there's my parents.
Really?
I know you guys.
Exactly. And so, Wicca really helped me because it took me back to pagan times, which are very Greek, obviously, and said the gods are real, they can talk to you, they're your parents, they're here to help. And then that's when I started having the conversation that never ends.
Well,
good. Well, good for you. I mean, for having that connection, and for expressing it and for bringing it out.
Well, the connection for you, Steve, is definitely in your heart chakra.
Well, I think so. I have had. I'll tell you one interesting incubation experience I had that had to do with the heart, because it's a very so you'd be lying completely still on the floor, on the ground, in this room, and all of a sudden I felt this this shaft of, let's call it light, I guess, run through my heart all the way up to the heaven, the cosmos, and right down, as far down as anything can go. And the shaft went right through my heart. And then my experience was that I just started spinning around that shaft, just rotating around it. And so my lovely little mind goes, oh, look, you're having a spiritual experience. and then a voice replies, so you think that's a spiritual experience, watch this, and then boom, everything's gone. Everything disappears, and there's nothing left but the substrate of being itself, which is sort of this, living blackness. This sort of living, that's the only thing I can explain it. It's the substrate, it's the ground of being from which everything emerges, moment by moment by moment.
Could you label it prima materia?
That would be the what's called the Rosicrucian, or the occult way of saying it. Yes, and in Sanskrit it'd be called Mula Prakriti.
Okay, great.
root Prakriti. So it's the root,
like the Muladhara, the root chakra.
It's the body of the goddess herself.
Oh my.
The mother goddess herself is just this body from which all things emerge. And at the heart of all manifestation is desire. And the desire, and it's said in the famous line in the Quran, I was a hidden jewel, I wanted to know myself. So there's the desire of the divine to be known, and in essence know itself, is the root of all manifestation.
I would call that a healthy desire.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. And all our desires really, are desires to return to that and to be one with that ground of being. but all of our desires are distorted into physical wants, and as you were talking before, just acquisition. But all of that is actually a distortion, in my understanding, of this original desire of the grounded being to know itself.
I can see how service to self is a distortion of that desire.
Mm-hmm.
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 Sure.
Brought about by logic, no doubt.
Yeah, well, of course, you justify anything, right? you know.
The most powerful people trick themselves the most.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think so. And so, I mean, speaking for myself, I do a pretty good job on myself too. So I can imagine, there are certain corridors of delusion that get long and wide.
Indeed. And I would like to go back to your shaman just for a moment with your shaman is very advanced, working with body parts and blood. This is very ancient, and I just wanted to put like a little trigger warning there for people to understand that you must be highly approved of to be able to be working with these things. Do not try this at your Western parties, please. So I just had to put that in there.
Good caveat.
Yes. Well, and initiation is dangerous.
People don't quite get that yet, but I believe in 2019 we're going to be seeing a lot of spontaneous Kundalini awakenings, and people aren't going to know what to do. Yeah, I do see that.
Well, and then maybe maybe there'll be enough people who've gone through it to help them out. But if that's what's going to happen, and it's kind of like getting back to Terence McKenna. He was always saying, "Well, geez, just dose the water and you just get it on."
That's my fantasy.
So I can see that as at least one possibility that might just work.
Well, I don't know. The CIA was trying that. It kind of backfired.
Well, it backfired because they were running the controls on all ends of it.
Intention is everything.
It sure.
But some stuff is out of their control, and that's human wisdom, human knowledge, human empathy, all that stuff that's out of their control because they just don't know what the hell to do with it. That's what they're trying to put the kibosh on.
Yeah,
it's quite obvious to me that they're losing. It's wonderful.
I think so. I think so. And a couple of years ago, I may not have said that.
We certainly were in despair, but we do see glimmers now.
But I think they are. I think they are losing. I think they're losing power, and I think they're desperate. Hence the chemtrails, hence 5G, hence artificial intelligence. These are all last-ditch efforts of a dying paradigm.
And also, evil cannot create. It is literally an idiot on purpose.
Exactly.
Therefore, it takes our spiritual mysticism and it inverts it. So transhumanism is actually the inverted enlightenment.
Oh, exactly. But they think it's enlightenment. Kurzweil and all those guys wanting to, jack into some, robotic, entity.
It is the soulless man's enlightenment. It's really actually a trap for the soul.
Oh God!
Exactly. That talk about hell.
A tesseract, like in Superman.
Jeez.
Yes.
Yeah, it's terrifying the thoughts of what that would be like.
But they're people in power just salivating over that.
And there will be people who sign up willingly.
And I understand because it is the inverted masculine, because all of us, just for the audience, we all have masculine and feminine within us. So I'm not talking about boys and girls, penises and vaginas. The masculine is over exaggerating our current culture. We came from a more balanced place back in Egypt, right? And then we began not only the knowledge of good and evil, it is the knowledge of gender itself. It is the knowledge of male and female, Shakti, Shiva, the Hieros Gamos. Everything about alchemy is about the twins, Gemini, and it is all about the hermaphrodite, at least in my teachings. This is how I get to the truth. Therefore, it is Hermes told me all of this duality is because it was a war to find out who loves who more.
Could you flesh that out a
Yeah,
little
I'd
bit?
like that fleshed
That's
out.
interesting. Yeah,
what
flesh
do you mean,
that out.
who loves who more?
Tell me something good.